Imagine sitting on your own front porch. You've been living in your new home for like barely 2 weeks.
Right, you're probably still unpacking boxes.
Exactly. You are literally still unpacking. You have never had a single run-in with the law, never had the police called to your address, and suddenly your yard is just swarmed by armed police officers.
Which is terrifying on its own.
Oh, absolutely terrifying. But they aren't treating you like a citizen who might have, a parking ticket or even a suspect in a standard crime. They are treating you like a highly volatile, violent psychiatric patient.
Wow.
Yeah. They are speaking to you through this very specific high-stress lens of a mental health emergency, and they're preparing to physically detain you and transport you to a psychiatric facility against your will.
And this is all happening before they even really talk to you.
Right. So the question is, how did they arrive at that extreme conclusion before even speaking to you? Well, because exactly 1 month prior, a police dispatcher sitting in a windowless room miles away typed the word chronic into a computer system.
It is a terrifying scenario, honestly, and it strikes at the very heart of how administrative data dictates physical reality. I mean, we interact with massive databases every single day, right?
Oh, for sure. Credit bureaus, medical records, human resources files.
Exactly. And we operate under this assumption that the data in those systems is a neutral reflection of facts.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because our mission today for this deep dive is to look at what happens when that data is not a neutral reflection, but a deliberate fabrication.
Which is a heavy topic.
It is. We are going to explore how a single fabricated word injected into a police database can completely rewrite a citizen's life.
Yeah.
And to do this, we are looking at a massive stack of source material centered around a specific federal civil rights lawsuit. This is case 4.25 CV-00383 JST.
Right, and we have a lot of supporting documents, too.
We do. Alongside the legal filings, we have the official Oakland Police Department computer-aided dispatch logs. Those are the CAD logs, which basically function as the department's digital brain. We also have raw 911 audio transcripts and an internal Office of Inspector General report that details the department's mental health protocols.
Okay, before we go any further, we really need to draw a very firm line in the sand regarding our approach to these documents today.
Good point.
The lawsuit we are examining contains explosive allegations. I mean, the plaintiff is alleging systemic corruption, intentional evidence manipulation, and severe violations of civil rights by sworn officers and city employees.
And that is a crucial point to make right up front. Our goal today is absolutely not to take sides. We aren't here to pass legal judgment or, to endorse the viewpoints of either the plaintiff or the defendants.
Right, we're not a jury.
We're not a jury and we're not investigators. Instead, we are just going to impartially examine the mechanics of the paper trail that's provided in these sources. We want to look at the how and the why of the data structure itself.
Because the plaintiff's filings allege a highly sophisticated manipulation of police protocols. And we are here to dissect exactly how those protocols actually function in the real world.
Right.
We're basically dissecting the anatomy of a digital fingerprint, focusing strictly on how information flows or, well, how it's alleged to have been manipulated from a civilian's mouth into the official law enforcement database.
So our focal point for this entire deep dive is a very specific date. September 1st, 2019.
The starting line.
The inciting incident. On this morning, a 911 call is made. A dispatcher answers. And ultimately, that dispatcher types the phrase, chronic issue, into the official police log.
In all caps, usually in those systems.
Right, all caps. And with those two words, an ordinary citizen is suddenly and secretly flagged for a tactical mental health police response.
And here's the really wild part.
What's that?
The detail that kicks this entire story into motion. The 911 caller never actually uttered the word chronic.
Never said it, not once.
No. So to understand how a system could allegedly be weaponized this way, we have to start at the absolute beginning of the data stream. We really have to look at the raw anatomy of that inciting 911 call and compare the spoken physical reality of the caller with the typed digital record that was created by the state.
Let's walk through the exact timeline provided in the source documents. It is 09:47 a.m. on September 1, 2019. A man named Moses Jacko calls 911 to report his neighbor.
Okay.
And we have the transcript of this call. The dispatcher begins asking standard intake questions. Jacko describes his neighbor as a black female in her 50s, about 5'4", with a medium build.
Right, and that is just the standard descriptive data gathering phase. The dispatcher is building a physical profile so that the responding officers know exactly who they are looking for when they arrive on the scene.
Makes total sense.
Yeah.
Then, The dispatcher asks about weapons, which obviously is standard protocol for officer safety to assess the immediate physical threat.
Absolutely vital.
Jacko explicitly states, and I'm quoting directly from the transcript here, "No, I didn't see any weapons."
Okay, so that establishes a very clear baseline. According to the caller's own admission, the officers are responding to a neighbor dispute, which is essentially just a verbal altercation, right?
Wow.
With no visible threat of lethal force.
Okay.
It is a low-level priority in the grand scheme of urban policing.
But the most glaring part of this entire audio transcript isn't what Jacko says. It's what he blatantly omits.
Right.
Throughout the entire call, Jacko described an immediate, isolated dispute. He claims his neighbor is yelling at him in that specific moment. But at no point in this audio, not a single time, does he utter the word chronic.
Wow.
He never suggests this is a long-term, ongoing pattern of behavior. He is reporting a single present tense event.
And the spoken reality essentially ends there. But the plaintiff's lawsuit alleges that this is exactly where the digital forgery begins.
Right.
Because when we contrast that audio transcript with the official CAD incident recall log specifically, this is incident number 1019 around 000000351, we see a startling divergence between what was spoken and what became official reality.
And for those who might not know, the CAD log is essentially the central nervous system of modern policing. When a dispatcher types into their terminal, that text is instantly beamed to the screens in the patrol cars of the officers driving to the scene.
Exactly. It dictates their reality before they even park their cruisers.
So what did the log actually say?
Well, the documents show that the dispatcher on duty, Chablis DeLove, operating under operator ID 4957, typed a very specific narrative into the CAD system. Rather than just read a dense string of police code, let's break down how she translated that call.
Okay, let's do it.
She types out the standard visual profile we discussed. She notes the neighbor is a black female, 50s, medium build. She notes no weapons seen. She codes it as a 415, which is the California Penal Code shorthand for disturbing the peace.
Which is all totally normal.
Completely normal. All of that is an incredibly mundane, accurate reflection of the audio.
But then, right at the end of that string of data, separated by 3 dashes, she tacks on 2 words that change everything. Chronic issue.
Yeah. Those 2 words exist entirely outside the physical reality of the 911 call. They represent a monumental escalation in the nature of the complaint.
Wait, let me push back on that for a second, though. Because, dispatchers deal with chaotic, screaming, highly emotional callers all day long, right?
Absolutely. It's an incredibly stressful job.
Right. They are constantly forced to synthesize messy human panic into neat little data boxes. So isn't it entirely possible that dispatcher DeLove just summarized the tone of the call as chronic because the caller sounded exhausted or frustrated? Could this just be a poor choice of shorthand rather than like a premeditated conspiracy?
That is a very logical question, but we really have to look at the mechanics of the dispatch profession. Dispatchers are heavily trained on the legal weight of their keystrokes.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, they are taught to report observable facts, not to diagnose the history of a situation based on a caller's tone. If a caller says, "My neighbor is yelling right now," typing chronic issue isn't just a summary, it's a profound editorialization.
I see what you mean.
Let's use a medical analogy. If you go to the emergency room because you stubbed your toe and you are acting very grumpy about it, the triage nurse might note that you are agitated.
Sure.
But if that nurse types chronic heart failure into your permanent medical chart, that isn't a poor choice of shorthand for your bad mood.
No, definitely not.
That is the fabrication of a severe condition that triggers a massive, highly specific escalation of medical protocol.
Right, because words in these systems aren't just descriptions. They are operational levers.
What's fascinating here is precisely that fact. By injecting the word chronic, dispatcher DeLove fundamentally altered the nature of the call from a standard, isolated, disturbing the peace complaint into a systemic, ongoing, and therefore much more volatile problem.
Wow.
The officers reading that screen in their cruiser do not hear the nuance of the caller's voice. They do not hear what was omitted. They rely entirely on the dispatcher's translation, and that translation just told them they were walking into a deeply ingrained historical conflict.
But that raises a massive red flag for me, because she typed chronic, which explicitly implies a history.
Right.
So if I am a supervisor or like an auditor looking at this system, my immediate next step is to pull the history for that address to see what this so-called chronic issue is all about. What happens when we pull the history for this specific house?
The system comes up completely empty.
Really?
Completely empty. And this is where the lawsuit shifts from alleging a simple error to alleging premeditated manipulation, because the timeline presented in the legal filings highlights a crucial, undeniable discrepancy.
Yeah, the targeted citizen, the neighbor who's the subject of this call, had only been living in her home for somewhere between 15 to 30 days prior to this September 1st incident. She had literally barely finished moving in.
Right. And more importantly, the documents show she had absolutely zero prior police history at this location.
None at all.
None. There were no previous noise complaints logged. There were no prior 911 calls from anyone in the neighborhood regarding her. There were no previous dispatch records. There was absolutely no paper trail whatsoever to justify the label of a chronic issue.
So we look at the literal dictionary definition of the word chronic. It means persisting for a long time or constantly recurring. How can a resident of 2 weeks who has never had a single documented interaction with the police at this address be classified as a chronic issue in an official law enforcement database?
Logically, based on the evidence available to the dispatcher on that morning, she cannot be.
Right.
And this impossibility leads directly to the lawsuit's central allegation regarding why this word was typed in the first place. The legal complaint outlines that this was not an accident, but rather that an Oakland police officer named Moses Jacko Jr, who happens to be the cousin of the 911 caller, Moses Jacko, allegedly orchestrated this.
Oh, wow. The cousin.
Yes, the cousin. The lawsuit claims Officer Romero spoon-fed this specific narrative to the dispatchers.
Okay, assuming for a moment that the allegation is true, why would a sworn officer need to feed this to a civilian dispatcher? I mean, if an officer wants a citizen flagged in the system, why wouldn't they just log into the database themselves and type it in? They have the clearance, right?
They do, but it comes down to the architecture of digital audit trails.
Ah, okay.
Every modern CAD and records management system is built to track its users. Whenever a file is altered, the system logs the user ID, the exact timestamp, and the specific keystrokes entered.
So there's always a digital paper trail.
Always. According to the filings, Officer Romero works in the cannabis unit. He has no jurisdictional or operational reason to be managing a random disturbing the peace call in this specific neighborhood.
Right, that would look incredibly suspicious.
Exactly. If he logs into the system and manually types chronic issue onto a file regarding his own cousin's neighbor, he leaves glaring, undeniable digital fingerprints. If an internal affairs auditor ever looks at that file, it looks like blatant, easily provable corruption.
Ah, I see. So he needs a proxy. He needs someone whose fingerprints are actually supposed to be on that file.
According to the plaintiff's allegations, yes. He needs a proxy who operates organically within the dispatch environment. A dispatcher taking a 911 call and typing notes into a CAD log looks completely natural to an auditor.
Because that is literally their job.
Exactly. Allegedly using dispatcher DeLove to precede the database, the false narrative is laundered. The lie becomes official, sanitized institutional data, completely stripped of any obvious digital connection to the officer accused of orchestrating it.
That is just a staggering concept, using the mundane, everyday machinery of bureaucracy to launder a fabrication so it looks like objective truth.
It really is.
But it brings up another question for me. Why that specific word? Why chronic? I mean, if the goal is just to harass a neighbor or get the police to show up and intimidate them, why not have the dispatcher type aggressive or hostile?
Because in the highly specialized, rigidly defined language of law enforcement dispatching, chronic is not just a descriptive adjective. As the lawsuit details, it is an operational dog whistle. It triggers a very specific set of protocols within the department.
Here's where it gets really interesting. To understand the immense power of this specific word, we have to look at the Internal Office of Inspector General report on the Oakland Police Department's mental health protocols.
Yeah.
We have to understand how the CAD system is literally programmed to react to certain stimuli, almost like an algorithm.
Right, and the OIG report provides extensive detail on the application of California Welfare and Institutions Code Section 5150. For context, this is a profound piece of legislation.
It really is.
It is the legal mechanism that allows police officers to involuntarily detain a citizen who is experiencing a mental health crisis. To execute a 5150 hold, an officer must have probable cause to believe the person is a danger to themselves, a danger to others, or is gravely disabled.
We need to pause and recognize the gravity of that. A 5150 hold is a massive deprivation of liberty. It entirely bypasses the standard Fourth Amendment protections against unreasonable seizure. There is no warrant, there's no judge, and no trial. It is executed instantly on the street, based entirely on an officer's immediate behavioral assessment, because it is treated legally as a severe medical emergency rather than a criminal act.
Exactly. The state relies heavily on the officer's judgment in these highly volatile moments. And because these situations require specialized handling and present unique dangers to both the citizen and the officers, police CAD systems are designed to aggressively flag individuals and specific locations that have a history of mental health crises.
To give them a heads up.
Right, the system wants to warn officers before they arrive.
So when dispatcher DeLove allegedly injects chronic issue into a CAD log for a simple disturbing the peace call, how does the system, and more importantly, how do the human officers reading that screen interpret that specific phrase?
The psychological literature on policing is very clear about this. They interpret it through the lens of anchoring bias.
Anchoring bias.
Right. The OIG report explicitly shows that these flags alter the entire tactical approach of the police department. The word chronic, when attached to a behavioral complaint, signals to the responding officers that they are not walking into a standard, rational dispute between two neighbors over a property line or loud music.
It shifts the whole paradigm.
It does. It signals they are walking into an unpredictable, potentially dangerous psychological event.
It's like an algorithm's recommendation engine on social media. Once you click on a certain type of video, the algorithm assumes your preference and only serves you content that confirms that tag. Once this citizen was tagged with chronic issue, the system only served the officer's information that confirmed a pathology.
That is a perfect analogy. The protocols actually instruct dispatchers to send specialized units when mental health issues are suspected. They look for CIT, which stands for Crisis Intervention Team Trained Officers, or MET-T, Mobile Evaluation Team units.
On the surface, that sounds like a good thing. I mean, you absolutely want specialized training in mental health professionals responding to mental health crises.
Oh, in a legitimate crisis, yes, it is absolutely vital. But consider the cognitive and psychological effect on the officers if the crisis is entirely fabricated.
Oh, man.
The responding officers arrive at the scene with their adrenaline already pumping, carrying a preloaded cognitive bias. They are expecting to encounter an emotionally unstable, irrational, and potentially dangerous subject.
Right, because the computer told them so.
Exactly. And because of that anchoring bias, they are not looking for a rational citizen trying to logically explain a noise complaint. They are actively looking for symptoms to confirm the psychiatric diagnosis the computer just handed them. A raised voice isn't seen as justifiable frustration, it's seen as a symptom of mania.
So, by injecting that one word on September 1st, the dispatcher secretly categorized this woman not as a resident making a noise complaint, but as a psychiatric target. The lens was permanently altered.
And according to the lawsuit, that September 1st entry was merely the planting of the seed. That fabricated label lay dormant in the CAD system's memory banks for exactly 1 month. Perfectly preserved, just waiting for the right moment to be weaponized.
Which brings us to the devastating culmination of this administrative manipulation on October 1st, 2019.
The harvest of the preceded narrative.
Let's look closely at the timeline of events on October 1st. Moses Jacko, the exact same neighbor from a month prior, calls 911 again. It is 08:21 a.m. This time, a different dispatcher answers the call. Her name is Zelenette McKellar.
Right.
And the audio transcript of this specific call is where we see the trap finally snap shut.
The transcript reveals a stunning procedural deviation. Normally, a dispatcher conducts a standard intake asking what the emergency is, where it is occurring, and who is involved.
Right, the basics.
But instead, dispatcher McKellar asks a highly irregular, incredibly leading question right out of the gate.
She asks the caller, Moses Jacko, is she mentally ill?
Think about the implications of that. A trained emergency dispatcher is actively prompting a civilian caller to provide a complex psychiatric diagnosis of his neighbor over the phone.
And Jacko's response reads like pure entrapment. He says, and I quote, "You already know that. That's why I'm taking her to court. Then I'm going to prove that she is."
Notice his phrasing there. He says, "You already know that." He is directly referencing the system's pre-existing bias, the chronic seed that was planted in the database a month prior.
The absurdity of this 08:21 a.m. call is staggering when you read the full transcript. Because later in this exact same audio recording, dispatcher McKellar asks Jacko what the neighbor is wearing. And Jacko admits he didn't even see her.
He hasn't even looked outside.
Right. He is claiming she is outside screaming and causing a disturbance, but he hasn't actually laid eyes on her. Yet the dispatcher does not question the physical impossibility of his observations. Instead, she is actively prompting him to validate a psychiatric label.
Because the goal of the call, as alleged in the plaintiff's legal filings, was not to investigate a real-time crime.
It was to activate the code.
Exactly. Once Jacko agreed to the prompt, the lawsuit claims dispatcher McKellar took the CAD system, referenced the chronic seed from September 1st, and officially marked the citizen's address as a 5150 location.
She didn't just put a warning on the person's name, she geographically marked the physical house.
Yes. She tied the physical address to a specific permanent watch list number in the database, 959-669-000. With a few keystrokes, the citizen's home was now officially digitally designated as a hazard zone for severe mental instability.
And once that digital switch is flipped, human logic takes a backseat and the machine takes over. What follows on the day of October 1st is a terrifying sequence of dispatch broadcasts.
It really is.
The logs show a coordinated echo chamber designed to make the fabricated lie completely unassailable to anyone questioning it.
The CAD logs from that day provide a masterclass in how a single fabricated data point is systematically transformed into undeniable institutional truth through the sheer force of repetition.
Let's look at the exact timestamps pulled from the source documents. At 8:56 a.m., dispatcher Zelenet McKellar broadcasts the 5150 code over the main police radio channel,
which alerts all active patrol units in that sector that a severe mental health crisis is allegedly unfolding.
Then, at 12:22 p.m., dispatcher Chablis DeLove, who the logs show was the original architect of the chronic label from a month prior, rebroadcasts the 5150 code over the radio.
And this reinforces the narrative hours later, ensuring that the next shift of officers coming on duty is equally primed with that same cognitive bias.
At 16:18 p.m., dispatcher Carlana Ingram rebroadcasts the 5150 code again. And the vital context here is that the CAD logs show the citizen was already being physically detained by officers on her porch at this exact time.
Which is wild, because broadcasting the code while the detention is already underway serves no tactical purpose. Its only function is to firmly, auditorily attach the psychiatric label to the physical arrest taking place in real time.
Finally, at 17:43 p.m., dispatcher Samantha Michelle Taylor issues a final rebroadcast of the code. Over the course of 9 hours, 4 different dispatchers hammered this fabricated psychiatric emergency into the digital and auditory record of the Oakland Police Department.
If we connect this to the bigger picture of how bureaucracies function, this is exactly how systemic reality is manufactured.
Right.
By repeatedly broadcasting the code, the dispatchers created an impenetrable wall of official fact. They established confirmation bias on a department-wide scale. If 4 different dispatchers say it's a 5150 over the radio and the central computer shows a permanent watch list number, then to the officers standing on the street, it is a 5150.
The data completely overrides the physical world right in front of their eyes.
Completely.
And we have absolute documented proof of that override happening in real time. At 18:09 p.m. that evening, one of the responding officers on the scene, Officer Carrillo, physically typed into his own operational report that the citizen's demeanor was, quote, calm and polite.
That is an incredibly profound detail.
Isn't it?
An observation of reality by a sworn officer that directly contradicts the legal definition of a 5150 mental health crisis, which requires the person to be in immediate danger or gravely disabled.
He sees a calm, polite woman standing on her porch. But the CAD system, the multi-dispatcher echo chamber, and the permanent watch list number demanded a crazy, dangerous person. And the system won.
They detained her anyway.
The fabricated digital reality completely overrode the officer's actual physical observations of a calm human being.
Which brings us to what the lawsuit alleges is the underlying motive for this entire operation. We have seen how the trap was built in the CAD logs. We have seen how the radio echo chamber validated it to the officers. But we have to look at the psychological mechanics that the lawsuit alleges was the ultimate goal of this dispatch manipulation.
The actual endgame.
Right. We have to talk about the concept of reactive abuse.
The plaintiff's filings claim that this elaborate 5150 framework wasn't just a complicated way to harass a neighbor. It was a highly calculated psychological strategy designed specifically to incite reactive abuse.
Yeah. I want you, the listener, to truly try and put yourself in this situation. Imagine you are in your home. You know you haven't done anything wrong. Suddenly, your property is swarmed by armed police officers. They don't treat you like a suspect they need to question. They treat you like a psychiatric patient they need to manage.
Which is incredibly disorienting.
Right. They talk down to you, they ignore your calm explanations, and they move to unlawfully detain you, to physically grab you and put you in the back of a cruiser based entirely on a lie told by your neighbor.
From a neurological standpoint, it is an incredibly stress-inducing, terrifying scenario. It is designed to trigger an immediate fight-or-flight response in the brain's amygdala.
Exactly.
And that is the terrifying nature of the procedural trap the lawsuit describes. If the targeted citizen reacts to this overwhelming, unjust violation of their rights with justifiable human anger, if they show deep distress, if they raise their voice, or heaven forbid, if they physically pull their arm away from being unlawfully grabbed by police officers, then the trap snaps shut. The officers can point to that very reaction, the panic caused entirely by the aggressive police presence itself, as objective proof that the person is, in fact, experiencing a volatile 5150 mental health crisis.
The lawsuit paints a picture of a self-fulfilling prophecy engineered by the state. The reaction to the abuse is logged as the justification for the abuse.
So by labeling her chronic and 5150 in the database a month before they even arrived, the dispatchers essentially gave the responding officers a blank check. Any reaction from the victim, no matter how biologically or psychologically justified, retroactively validates the initial lie typed into the computer.
Yes. The legal complaint explicitly claims this stage was meticulously set to justify extreme, even potentially fatal force.
Wow.
Because police officers are legally permitted to use physical force to detain someone on a 5150 hold if they believe the person poses a danger to themselves or others. If the citizen had panicked, if she had fought back against being removed from her own porch without a warrant, the officers would have escalated their use of force.
And then what happens?
Well, when the subsequent internal investigation occurred, the department would point straight to the preloaded CAD logs stating chronic issue and the 5150 location flag to protect the officers from liability.
They would frame the victim's justifiable panic as a dangerous psychotic break that required physical subdual.
The dispatcher's keystrokes on September 1st essentially stripped the citizen of her fundamental right to be presumed rational. By the time the officers arrived on October 1st, her sanity had already been administratively revoked by the CAD system.
It was gone before they even pulled up.
Exactly. Every single word she spoke in her own defense, even if calm and polite, would be inherently filtered through the lens of mental illness.
Okay, let's take a breath and synthesize what we've uncovered in this deep dive. We have tracked a terrifying bureaucratic journey through the source documents. We saw how the deliberate, calculated insertion of a single medically loaded word, chronic, by dispatcher Chablis DeLove entirely bypassed all concepts of legal due process.
It bypassed the court system, it bypassed any actual investigation, and it bypassed the physical truth of the initial 911 call, where the caller explicitly stated there was no ongoing issue and no weapons.
Right. It turned a mundane administrative CAD log into a tactical weapon. That single word triggered specialized mental health protocols, fundamentally altered the cognitive mindset of the responding officers through anchoring bias, and orchestrated a coordinated multi-dispatcher echo chamber that culminated in the unlawful psychiatric detention of an innocent citizen on October 1st.
It demonstrates a chilling reality. The most dangerous weapon in a modern police department might not be a firearm, but a keyboard with administrative access to the central database.
So what does this all mean for you? Why should you care about the internal CAD protocols of the Oakland Police Department? Well, because it is a stark, neon-flashing reminder of the fragility of our reality in the digital age. Your physical safety, your liberty, your very right to be treated as a sane, rational human being can be entirely dependent on the invisible keystrokes of a government employee or a corporate administrator sitting in a windowless room miles away.
It's unsettling.
Extremely. Whether it's a police database, a credit score algorithm, or a medical file, the system can dictate your reality without your input.
We operate under the assumption that our innocence is a shield. We assume that our calm demeanor and logical explanations will protect us when confronting authority. But this case study alleges that your official digital identity can be completely rewritten, corrupted, and weaponized in a matter of seconds without your knowledge, without your consent, and without a single shred of physical evidence to support it.
It is the ultimate administrative nightmare. The system is spoken, and therefore the physical truth no longer matters.
And it leaves us with a deeply unsettling reality to confront long after this discussion ends. We rely implicitly on emergency dispatchers to send help when we are in danger. They are the vital first line of defense in a civilized society. But this raises an important question. If the official databases that dictate armed police action can be manually injected with psychological dog whistles like chronic issue, without any corroborating evidence, without any oversight, and completely immune to the physical observations of officers on the ground, how can any citizen ever definitively prove to the state that they aren't crazy when the state's own computers have already been ordered to disagree?